ever any doubts, Max Verstappen wins the season opening Bahrain Grand Prix by a whopping 22 seconds. As put by Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff, he was in another galaxy. From RacingNews365.com, my name is Nick Golding, and as always, I'm joined by lead editor Ian Parks to discuss all of today's action. Ian, Max claimed pole. He won the race. He led every lap. He set the fastest lap. I mean, that's how you start a title defence.
Pretty impressive, wasn't it? The Grand Chelem for the first time in Formula One history in the opening race of a season. That's now his fifth of his career, tying with Michael Schumacher and Alberto Ascari, two of the greats, the all-time greats in Formula One history. As you say, it couldn't have been any more impressive. His margin of victory, 22.5 seconds, almost double compared to his margin of victory last year over his teammate Checo Perez. Toto Wolff succinctly put it, he wasn't just on another planet today, he was actually on another galaxy. And that says all you need to know about the performance of Max Verstappen. Just incredible what they've done with that car. Just incredible how he has carried on his high level of performance out of last season into this season. And you just have to give him and the team maximum credit for what they
And obviously
achieved.
it was a Red Bull 1-2 with Perez going from fifth to second. A good performance by him as well. Let's talk about Ferrari, because yesterday when we made our predictions for the podium, you said that both Ferrari drivers would be there. I'm not even going to say mine because mine couldn't be any more wrong. I said Russell and Alonso, for anybody wondering. But Ferrari, Sainz, I thought, did brilliantly today. Leclerc obviously was unhappy throughout the race. He was nursing several problems. I think nursing problems was a bit of a theme for the race. Russell had problems. Lewis had problems. Alex Albon had problems. Do you think Ferrari will be a bit disappointed they couldn't take the fight more to Red Bull, given how strong they looked in qualifying and throughout free practice?
Yeah, I'm not too bad with my prediction, was I? I got 1-3 today. I predicted Max first, obviously, and Sainz third. I was just slightly out with the second place guy. I did think Charles Leclerc would hold on to that front grid slot alongside Max, but he ended up fourth, as we know. He obviously had his issues with right turn on that car. As we saw, he had a couple of lockups on occasions, and he didn't nowhere near have the pace of his teammate. Carlos was all over him. I think they can be relatively satisfied when you consider that Sainz was fourth last year. Sainz was the lead Ferrari last year, and he finished 48 seconds behind Max. Today, it was around 25, 26, something along those lines. So they've almost halved the gap. So if you want to look at the bright side for Ferrari, there you have it. There is something better to build on this year than they had last year. They are that much closer. It's just that Max is just streaks ahead of everybody else. But they do have at least Checo in their sights, bearing in mind where he finished. Okay, he started from fifth on the grid, got to second, to give Red Bull that one too. Credit to him to a certain extent, but certainly Ferrari have at least something that, as I say, that they can build on going into the rest of the season now. So not too bad for them.
Obviously, we saw a good fight between Carlos and Leclerc. Given the situation that Carlos finds himself in without having a seat for next season, do you think he's, driving for himself, or is he still, driving for the good of the team?
They'll be both. Of course, he's driving for the good of the team. He's going to want to finish with that team as high as he possibly can, quite naturally. And he's want to prove, I would have thought, something to the team. Hey, you shouldn't have got rid of me. I've done a decent job for you over the time I've been here. Okay, of course he's going to understand the attraction of a 7-time Formula One world champion. And Fred Vasseur, as we know, has a really good, strong history with Lewis Hamilton. But he's going to be thinking to himself, Carlos, well, I get that to a certain extent, but I do think I deserved my place here. I do think I deserve to carry on. So that was a great performance from him. I thought he drove superbly. He was driver of the day at the end of the day, according to the viewing poll. So well done to him. And yeah, 1-0 Carlos over Charles. But we're going to see what's going to happen because we know he wants a decent seat. We know he's going to want to push Checo for the Red Bull seat. We know he's going to want to potentially take over from Lewis at Mercedes, go in the opposite direction. I don't think he's going to be particularly happy with any of the other teams lower down the grid that are searching for their drivers for next year. So, as I say, he's going to want to give it absolutely everything he's got because he's going to want the best seat possible now he's out of Ferrari.
Speaking of Mercedes, obviously George Russell was in 5th, Lewis in 7th. Norris found himself in 6th in a Mercedes sandwich. Both drivers, reported problems. George was told he had to cool the car. Given that, as you've said, the last few days, how cold it's been in Bahrain, is there something a bit more here for Mercedes to be worried about, considering that these aren't normal Bahrain conditions? It's normally warmer than this, but they're still having cooling problems.
No, not at all. Toto Wolff was asked exactly that during his post-race debrief by the media, and he's quietly confident it was just one of those things. Okay, it occurred as well with the Williams cars. So something to look at there for Mercedes, but I asked Toto whether it was something that could be cured in time for Saudi Arabia, and especially as well, given the considerable increase in temperatures. We're looking potentially 15, 16 degrees difference. We're looking in the low 30s there. We've been in the high teens here, unseasonably low for Bahrain, but absolutely not an issue for Mercedes. Just one of those things. No problems at all with the short time that they've got to look into it between now and Thursday. I had to just think of it again.
It's confusing.
It's sort of the Saturday Grand Prix next weekend. So, yeah, I know. So, yeah, Thursday practice, Friday qualifying, Saturday Grand Prix in Saudi Arabia, just as we've had here in Bahrain. But no concerns whatsoever.
Now, despite some drivers having experienced problems, we had all 20 cars finish. The only 2 yellow flags we had were the first corner on the first lap where Nico Hülkenberg, by accident, went into the back of Lance Stroll. It was a racing incident. Both drivers finished. Stroll even recovered to the points. And then Logan Sargent, in the opening laps, his steering wheel, which was then changed in a pit stop, decided that he needed full brake bias, which is probably not ideal on the way into turn 4. Given that all 20, were you surprised to see all 20 cars finish, given that it's a new season, there are lots of new cars, new concepts, and it shows that reliability amongst all the teams is actually really strong.
It has been like that for quite some time now when you think about it, Nick. Okay, yes, perhaps it was unusual slightly that we had all 20 finish a season opening race, but for the most part, we've seen real high rates of reliability going back for a few years now. Very, very few retirements mechanically for teams over the years. Yes, there are certain circuits where, and we've got them coming up, Saudi Arabia, Australia, that we know are prone to on-track incidents. And yes, the rate there of cars seeing the checkered flag is slightly diminished because we have accidents. But in terms of actual reliability, these cars these days are just proving themselves to be so much more bulletproof than they've ever been in Formula One history. Might be a little bit different when we get to 2026 and we have new power units again. Remember back in 2014 when we had the introduction of a brand new power unit system then that we're still running at the moment. Got these into the last 2 years now of these power units. And the reliability rate then was very low. Many retirements due to the power unit systems. Are we going to see something similar in 26? Okay, yeah, I know I'm talking 2 years away. And right now, fantastic reliability from these cars. And you just got to give credit to all the teams for what they're producing and building. Just superb performance across the board, really.
Let's talk RB, because going into the weekend, I keep saying weekend, but actually today's the only day of the weekend that's had F1 action. But going into the Grand Prix, there's a lot of talk in RB. Would they score points? How good were they going to be? Neither Tsunoda nor Ricciardo finished in the points. And Tsunoda was in the top 10 for a little while, but ultimately fell out of it. Those two ended up competing with each other over team orders. On the cool-down lap, Tsunoda actually dived up the inside of Ricciardo in anger because he was told to let Ricciardo pass. Do you think they're going to be disappointed with today? Because there was so much talk about them going into the season opener.
Yeah, absolutely, Nick. I think it's one of those races where it just didn't quite go right for them. We know what they've done in terms of the taking of parts, as many as they possibly can within the regulations from the sister team Red Bull. And as you say, it was fully expected that they would be certainly top of the midfield. That clearly was not the case. We quite clearly have a pecking order. We have the top bar. We have Red Bull way out in front. Then you have the three teams below vying for those second, third, fourth places from what we've seen so far. Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, Aston Martin just a little bit behind. And then it's take your pick with regards to the other five positions, 6 to 10. Although Alpine clearly at the bottom at the moment, they've got a lot of work to do. RB, definitely a bit of a disappointment. Will the warmer climbs suit them next week in Bahrain? Different track, different circuit, different tarmac. We've got to wait and see. I still think there is more to come from them. But yes, absolutely considerable disappointment on their part. And of course, squabbling already between Daniel and Yuki. I don't think that's the end of it between those two guys, because they know exactly what's at stake. They know if either of them can perform, then there is a good possibility that they could be facing Checo Perez at Red Bull next season.
And you just mentioned a little bit about Alpine. It gets even worse for them. Obviously, there was some breaking news exclusively from racingnews365.com before the race. Can you just explain really what's going on? Because their misery is just building and building.
Yeah, as you say, I discovered just before the race that Matt Harmon, technical director, and Dirk De Beer, the head of aerodynamics, they handed in their resignations a few weeks ago. They are currently serving out their notice period. It's anticipated that they're likely to leave somewhere around April. Just another kick in the teeth for that team. Bearing in mind, the car that has been produced is considerably off the pace. We saw the two cars finishing 17th and 18th today, and that was only because the two behind them encountered issues that meant that they finished behind the two Alpines. Otherwise, without that, the two Alpines would have finished 19th and 20th as they started this Grand Prix. That is one hell of a mess. You've got to trace it back to last year, and you think of all the changes that were made behind the scenes. Laura Rossi going to CEO, Otmar Zafnauer as team principal, Pat Fry as chief technical officer, Alan Permain as sporting director, and now here we are going into a brand new season where they would have wanted stability, where they'd hoped in unveiling a different concept of car that they would have been able to have hit the ground running this season. But even before a wheel had turned in anger, Matt Harmon and Dirk De Beer had decided to hand in their resignations, leaving that team in even more turmoil. If it could be possible for that team, then it has been. So they've got a lot to fix, both on and off track.
Well, they'll be hoping for a miracle next week in Saudi Arabia. Ian, just finally, again, I'm going to let you choose first or second. Your driver of the day. Obviously, Carlos got the public vote, but come on, let's go for our personal driver of the day. Is it first or second? Your choice, as I'm being kind for you.
I know I'm going to be the gentleman again, Nick, and I'm going to allow you to
go. I know. What can I say? I mentioned him a little bit earlier. For me, Lance Stroll, actually, I was really impressed. He had the worst start possible after facing the wrong direction at the end of after the first corner for something completely out of his control. It was a racing incident, wasn't even investigated, and rightly so, but recovered to P10, which actually, considering Alonso went backwards to P9, I was really impressed by him. There was quite a lot of pressure on Lance this season, given his struggles last year. So I think to get a point for the team, having been last into the first lap, is, I think, a real confidence boost for him. But what about for you then, driver of the day?
Yeah, it's a really good shout, actually, with regard to Lance. To go from last to 10th in a field as well, where, as we've already pointed out, the reliability was so high that all 20 cars finished. It could have been even better for him, but of course, every car saw the checkered flag. So to get actually a point, hats off to him. Brilliant job. Carlos as well. I kind of think he got the TV vote, as we've seen, simply because he was on it. As we've discussed as well, he seemed to have a point to prove today, and that car just worked for him. So to go from, to get a solid third place was a great drive in many respects, considering as well how close he finished behind Checo Perez. As I say, when you look back to a year ago, how far he was behind the Red Bulls, at least he was within almost touching distance of Sergio. Last year, nowhere near. So, in fairness, I'm probably going to go with you. I'm going to join forces with you. I'm going to go for Lance simply because of the position he was in at the very start to the position he finished. He deserves a bit of credit for that. Perhaps arguably so a bit more than Carlos, but credit to Carlos as well for the performance he put in finishing so close to the
Excellent
second
stuff. Well, Ian, you've not got long. Go and get yourself to Saudi Arabia, because next week is the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. There is no time for rest. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. Myself and Ian will see you next week for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Goodbye.